There is a quiet ache that follows some people long after childhood ends. It is not a scream, nor a wound that bleeds openly. It is a subtle tension beneath the skin, a trembling that appears when trust feels uncertain, when warmth is met with hesitation. To grow up without emotional safety is to learn early that your feelings might be too much, too heavy, or too easily dismissed. Small moments, a glance, a question, a pause, can echo decades later, shaping the ways you love, speak, and even breathe. The absence of consistent care leaves invisible marks, subtle yet profound, shaping the body, the mind, and the heart in ways often unseen. This is the hidden pain of a childhood where emotional presence was scarce. Chapter 1. Recognizing the silent ache. Some of the deepest wounds are the ones we barely notice. They live in the quiet corners of daily life, in the small hesitations and fleeting sensations that never seemed worth naming. A child who grew up without consistent emotional safety may have learned to measure every word, to soften every feeling, to anticipate the judgment or absence that might follow. These habits do not vanish with adulthood, they transform, hiding in subtle patterns that whisper of long-forgotten fears. You might feel a sudden tightening in the chest when someone looks too closely, a reluctance to share joys, or a muted excitement that is immediately dampened by self-doubt. There may be moments when intimacy feels both irresistible and terrifying, when closeness awakens an instinct to retreat. These reactions are not failures of character, they are echoes of what was never reliably offered, a presence that was gentle, consistent, and emotionally attuned. Recognition begins with noticing these patterns without blame. It is seeing that the tension in your shoulders, the careful words, the invisible walls are not signs of weakness, but survival mechanisms forged long ago. The ache is silent, yet it is persistent. It is a subtle companion in conversations, in relationships, in moments of solitude. To recognize it is to illuminate what has been hidden, to give voice to feelings that were once discounted. And in that acknowledgement, the first threads of understanding, and later healing, begin to emerge quietly, without rush, within the steady rhythm of being seen and heard. Chapter 2. Origins of emotional scarcity. The roots of emotional scarcity often take hold long before conscious memory. In homes where words were measured, where affection was conditional, or where attention shifted like a flickering light, a child learns early that their inner world might be unsafe to reveal. It is not always neglect in the dramatic sense. Sometimes it is a parent absorbed in their own struggles, a caregiver whose love was inconsistent, or moments when validation was offered only for achievement, not presence. Each experience, however subtle, lays the foundation for a sense of self that must remain guarded. Children are profoundly sensitive to nuance. A sigh, a diverted gaze, a moment of impatience, all become coded in the mind as signals. My feelings are too much, my needs may cause harm. In households where emotional responses were unpredictable, trust itself becomes a fragile concept. The young mind begins to build quiet strategies, to minimize, to anticipate, to perform emotional safety before it is offered. These strategies are adaptive, protective, and often invisible to outsiders. Emotional scarcity is not always born of ill intent. Caregivers may have struggled with their own limitations, repeating patterns learned from their own past. Yet the impact on the child is tangible, shaping their expectations of connection and love. It creates an invisible architecture of caution, a framework where openness is risky and retreat feels necessary. Understanding these origins is not about blame, it is about seeing the invisible forces that shaped a lifelong rhythm of caution, setting the stage for the subtle ache that lingers into adulthood. Chapter 3. The psychology behind it. The echoes of an emotionally unsafe childhood are more than memories, they are patterns etched into the very biology of the body and mind. Early experiences shape the nervous system, creating responses that persist long after the original environment has passed. The amygdala, ever vigilant for threat, learns to interpret subtle cues as danger. A sigh, a frown, a pause in attention, small signals become alarms. The child's brain does not distinguish between physical harm and emotional neglect. Both are encoded as risk. Attachment theory offers a framework to understand this. Secure attachment arises from consistent, responsive care. When care is absent, inconsistent, or harsh, the mind develops strategies to anticipate and avoid emotional danger. Some children withdraw, becoming quiet observers. Others perform, seeking approval and validation to secure fleeting safety. These patterns solidify into schemas, deep cognitive frameworks about he, self, others, and relationship. The world comes to feel unpredictable, intimacy perilous, and emotional expression a potential liability. Physiologically, these patterns are embodied. Shoulders tense, breath constricts, and heart rates subtly shift when closeness or scrutiny appears. These reactions are not conscious choices, they are survival responses honed over years. Even in adulthood, the body may react before the mind registers threat, producing hesitation, fear, or resistance in moments of connection. Understanding the psychology behind this ache is the first step toward compassion. It illuminates why patterns persist, why certain relationships feel risky, and why the longing for safety can coexist with fear. The mind and body are not failing, they are remembering. Recognizing these mechanisms transforms the invisible ache from an inexplicable burden into a story that can be understood, acknowledged, and gently addressed over time. Chapter 4. Inner Conflict and Resistance. Even with awareness, the ache of emotional deprivation is rarely straightforward. Within, a subtle tug-of-war unfolds. The longing for connection wrestles with the instinct to protect. One part reaches toward warmth, to be seen, to be understood. Another recoils, wary of the consequences. The very desire for intimacy can awaken caution, creating a delicate dance between approach and retreat. This tension manifests in small, often unnoticed ways. Conversations may feel like tests, gestures of kindness may trigger suspicion, and moments of vulnerability may provoke internal alarm. The masks cultivated in childhood, politeness, composure, agreeableness, still serve as shields, filtering expression to avoid discomfort or rejection. Each gesture of openness carries with it the echo of past risks, and the mind anticipates disappointment before it occurs. Resistance is not laziness, indifference, or moral failing. It is a strategy refined over years, a silent contract between self-protection and yearning. The internal dialogue is complex. I want closeness, but closeness could hurt. I crave understanding, but understanding may expose me. Even when safe relationships are present, these automatic patterns can make connection feel precarious. Recognizing this inner conflict is crucial. It illuminates why old fears resurface unexpectedly, why moments that should feel simple are fraught with hesitation, and why healing requires patience. The ache is not merely emotional, it is a negotiation between survival instincts and the human capacity for intimacy. By observing the resistance without judgment, the individual begins to see it not as a limitation, but as a testament to resilience, a protective rhythm that can slowly be softened as trust is rebuilt. Chapter 5. Moments of realization. Awareness often arrives not in grand revelations, but in the quiet pulse of small, ordinary moments. A gentle question from a friend. A pause that invites honesty. A glance that lingers without judgment. These subtle interactions can awaken recognition. The patterns of fear that have guided years of behavior, the strategies of protection that once kept a child safe, and the ache that never fully disappeared. The mind begins to trace the line between past and present, seeing the echoes of childhood in current responses. A flinch at intimacy is no longer merely a personal failing, it is a memory embedded in the body. A reluctance to share emotions is not indifference, but the residue of experiences where openness was met with dismissal or unpredictability. In these moments, understanding dawns. The fear that once seemed irrational is rooted in real, formative experiences. Realization does not demand immediate transformation. It is contemplative, subtle, and often accompanied by tenderness. There may be relief in naming the invisible forces at play, but also sadness in witnessing their enduring presence. The awareness itself becomes a form of acknowledgement, a recognition that the self, whole, complex, and tender, has navigated adversity with resilience. These moments of insight, though quiet, can shift perception. They allow the individual to begin distinguishing between the past and present, between automatic defenses and conscious choice. The ache remains, but it is now framed within understanding rather than confusion. And within that understanding, the first threads of intentional healing can gently take root, softening the rigid boundaries of long-held protection and opening the possibility for connection that once felt too perilous to attempt. Chapter 6. Pathways to Integration. Healing from a childhood lacking emotional safety is rarely dramatic. It unfolds quietly, in subtle recalibrations of body and mind. A breath held a little less tightly. A truth shared in fragments rather than rehearsed script. A moment in which presence is allowed without immediate retreat. These micro-moments accumulate, weaving a sense of inner security that was once absent. Integration begins with self-compassion. Recognizing the patterns of avoidance and protection not as flaws, but as survival strategies, opens space for gentleness. The body, long attuned to vigilance, learns that closeness need not equal danger. Shoulders soften, heartbeats steady, and the nervous system gradually distinguishes between threat and safety. These physiological shifts mirror the psychological one, the capacity to approach rather than evade, to trust rather than anticipate rejection. Relationships play a profound role. Encounters with empathetic, attuned individuals provide mirrors of safety previously unavailable. Here, boundaries are respected, emotions are acknowledged, and presence is consistent. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice openness in a measured, secure environment. The lessons of the past do not vanish, but they are contextualized within a framework of choice rather than automatic survival. Integration is also narrative. Reflecting on one's life, witnessing the interplay between early deprivation and current responses, and naming the ache with clarity transforms it into story rather than burden. Gradually, emotional scarcity is counterbalanced by the cultivated experience of being met, understood, and accepted. In these pathways, resilience and vulnerability coexist. The individual learns that wholeness is not defined by the absence of past wounds, but by the gentle incorporation of them into a living, breathing self. Integration is not perfection. It is presence, honesty, and a growing capacity to be seen without fear. Chapter 7. Reflection on Growth and Wholeness. Time reveals the quiet shifts that mark recovery. The ache of unmet emotional needs does not vanish entirely. It lingers like a faint echo, a reminder of what once shaped every gesture and hesitation. Yet, alongside this echo emerges a new rhythm, one of measured presence, of trust gradually extended, and of the self gently recognized in its entirety. The individual who once guarded every feeling now notices subtle freedoms, a breath that deepens naturally, a smile that appears without calculation, a voice that speaks truth without rehearsal. Growth is less a sudden transformation than a slow attunement to life's subtle cues. The body and mind learn to distinguish between genuine risk and habitual fear. Relationships no longer trigger instinctive retreat, but invite reflection and engagement. Connection, once dangerous, becomes a landscape in which one can explore vulnerability safely, knowing that being seen does not demand perfection or abandonment. Wholeness emerges not from erasing the past, but from its integration. Every moment of understanding, every act of gentle presence, both given and received, reframes the narrative. The ache is honored, yet it no longer dictates choice. Memory and instinct coexist with conscious awareness, allowing the self to navigate intimacy with curiosity rather than alarm. In reflection, there is gratitude for resilience, for the strategies that once preserved life and for the capacity to unlearn them without judgment. The story of emotional scarcity becomes part of a larger tapestry, a testament to human adaptability and the quiet courage of survival. Ultimately, the individual discovers that being seen, being known, and being held is not a danger, but a profound affirmation of the life that has endured, and of the possibility of connection finally embraced.